Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa, who's the Executive Director of Usawa Agenda, we've been talking about this for weeks now. Where do you see the gaps? We've also seen the story that was done earlier by Brenda Wanga about some children who are perhaps interested in a STEM pathway but are seeing a microscope for the first time. Where do you see the issues during this transition phase?
Thank you, Yvonne, for having me. I'm happy to be here to participate in this important discussion. I see a few gaps. First of all, let me commend the ministry for providing these guidelines and for sharing them with the public in good time so that there is room to interrogate them and raise a few issues that we can raise and hopefully have them factored into the revisions so that by the time we are applying these guidelines, they are tight enough to make sure that we get the best we can get as we transition this class to senior school. There are a few issues that I would want to point out. One is in the decision that all schools will provide at least 2 pathways. I hold the view that that should be the goal, but it should not be the implementation now. It should not be implementation now because a number of our secondary schools, mostly sub-county schools, are not capable of being STEM schools for now. It should remain in the plan that we will upgrade them to become STEM schools as well, but for now they are not. What do I mean by this? We have schools that don't have STEM teachers. We have schools that don't have any laboratory. And making them STEM when they are the schools that have been producing all the E's in math, all the E's in biology, all the E's in chemistry and physics, if you put a child in those schools restricted to study those subjects that those schools have been producing E's in, you have actually put that child into a tunnel to nowhere because it simply means you have trapped them into definite failure at the end. So I feel that we continue to allow that there be some schools this time for this first cohort and maybe the second that will only be 1 pathway schools that will provide humanities because of that limitation that practically we do not have enough time to upgrade those schools to be able to offer STEM by the end of the year. 2
questions with that. I mean, one is this is grade 9. Yes, it is, the first cohort of this. It's been 9 years.
Yes.
To get us there. Also, the schools then that are able to provide STEM, won't they now all be crowded by, perhaps those that choose the STEM pathway? And per the government directive, I think they want, more than 60% of the students to pick STEM?
I will come to that, 60% as well.
Yeah.
But I think we failed to plan to implement CBC. We implemented in a hurry without a costed implementation plan. So we have come from a set of foundational challenges in terms of implementing CBC. And I think that is something to take into account. So we need to find an incremental path towards the ambition that we have of what we want to make out of CBC. So that is one. The second thing that is what you just talked about, KIPSEA contributing 20% of the marks that will actually add up to the total in grade 9. 2 important issues around that. One, I don't think it's fair to allow a child's future to be impacted by what they did when they were 12. When these children were sitting KIPSEA, they were 12 years old. It is not fair to let what they did when they were 12 to determine their path in life. Because when you add that score to the exit grade at grade 9, and placement into grade 10 is going to be influenced by merit, it means that you are impacting the kind of school that this child will be able to be admitted to. So that is one. The second is the fact that we have children in grade 9 who did not sit KIPSEA. So where does their 20% come from if they did not in the first place sit KIPSEA exam? So for me, my suggestion, and this is our suggestion as Usawa Agenda, is that we have the final exam take 80%. at least for now.
The one they will do in
yes,
grade 9 at the end of this year?
The one they are doing at the end of this year takes 80%, and the other 20% comes from the school-based assessments. Over time, as we continue to develop capacities of teachers and reliability of the school, we test the reliability of the scores we are getting from these schools, we will be able then to say we want the terminal exam to take less, maybe 70, and school-based assessments to take 30. We can increase that over time after we test the reliability of this, because we know the reason why we guard KCSE with a gun is because we think the invigilators will be under duress to allow cheating. How safe are the teachers who live in the communities who are awarding the marks for this school-based and marks which is going to contribute to the competition that we are now anticipate for the good schools at the end of grade 9. So I feel that we need to approach with caution, start with a smaller percentage, and then grow it as we determine the reliability over time.
Do you think the school-based assessments are standardized across the country? So is that a fair measure?
They are standardized, but it is the teachers who mark and input the marks.
All right.
And if there is undue pressure exacted on those teachers, even beside the undue pressure, the fact that these same teachers are evaluated in terms of how well their learners perform, there is a conflict of interest. It is a good thing, but let us start small. Let us allow that to contribute less, and then over time, we can increase that as we determine the reliability. That is the third thing, the second thing I want to mention. The third thing I want to mention is we have indicated in these guidelines that teachers are going to assess the level, they are going to assess the learners for the pathways that they take. Several issues arise from this, especially with the current cohort of grade 9. One, when we did a study last December, 35% of our schools did not have a STEM teacher then. TSC has hired STEM teachers this January.
Yeah.
Selection of pathways is next term. Yeah. Have these teachers had time to even know the children and be able to assess them fairly and determine that they can take particular pathways? We don't think that they have had that time. But importantly, this is a hefty responsibility. Hefty responsibility that is full of risks. There is risk of these teachers being subjected to undue pressure by parents who feel their children must take certain pathways. And let us recall that these are young teachers. They have just been hired, inexperienced. And two, there is also risk of teachers abusing this. Abusing because of one of the things that has been put in the guidelines, which says not more than 5 learners from the same junior school will be admitted to the same senior school.
Yes.
I have a case where the school was trying to prevent my friend's son from choosing Alliance High School because they had an interest in another boy in that class. They wanted to go to Alliance, and they had been told that Alliance will not take 2 boys from the same school. So in that context, there is possibility that some teachers may abuse this role if there is no mechanism to check that possibility, to prevent abuse, so that they tailor certain children to certain paths and certain children schools towards certain paths.
Do you think overall, and we'll talk about maybe where the solutions lie, and you've already started to touch on that, but do you think overall the learners are ready to make this decision? Because it is a life-changing decision, and in the guidelines that we have referred to for our reporting, it does say that at some point students would be allowed to change pathways. How that would work is perhaps something we can try and talk about. But do you think they are ready? Because this is supposed to be based on the teachers, the learners, and the parents working together towards making this all-important decision. Has there been enough career guidance and counseling? Considering this is now going to be happening next term, they're going to be making perhaps one of the most important decisions of their lives.
So the way CBC was designed in the framework junior school was supposed to be a place where there is constant interaction between the child, the teacher, and the parent. So by this time, we should not even be worrying about which choices these grade 9s will make. We would already be knowing.
It should be obvious, right?
And actually, in some private schools, it is not so much of a concern. They know, the parents, the teachers, and the child have been talking. They are going to be able to make the right decision. In most of our public schools, this has not happened. There has been a big challenge in implementing junior education in public schools. And so for that reason, shortage of teachers, one teacher teaching a huge class, teachers teaching subjects that they are not trained in, and therefore not being able to really evaluate how those learners are performing in those subjects. We have a challenge there, which is why I feel that this year, most likely, placement into pathways is going to depend just on two things: what the child expresses as their interest and what the score tells about the child. Because there hasn't been guidance, there hasn't been that interaction that was envisaged. So for me, I think that we can bite the bullet and say, let this year score and the child's expressed interest be the determinants.
As we add the other criteria and
then continue to develop mechanisms to make sure that going forward, junior school is capable of playing the function it was meant to play. Because junior school is the most critical segment of CBC as a curriculum. So I think that it's important to note. And actually on the issue of career counseling, previously we chose career pathways after Form 4. And you had career teachers in secondary school.
Yeah.
Primary schools don't have career teachers. So there is no one who has been guiding these children. Our suggestion is that COOPS starts to train career teachers in junior schools so that these career teachers will be the ones working with these children from the time they enter grade 7 and be the ones interacting regularly with parents to make sure that by the time the child is getting to grade 9, the parent knows where the child stands and the child's interest is taken care of and they are able to guide that choice.
Finally, Dr. Manyasa, what are the things that can be done? Because here we are. I mean, I know I've heard some people talking about reverting 2844. We're 9 years into CBC with this first cohort. So what can be done, at least for this very critical transition point that we find ourselves at? What can we do for the next term, for the next 6 months, and maybe even long term in terms of making sure that they're ready, that the STEM schools are ready, that senior school have the right infrastructure, equipment, trained personnel?
A few important things. One, let us tighten these guidelines. Remove the gaps that are in them. A gap, for instance, that says that if you're going to join as a day scholar to a secondary school, you will only be allowed in it provided that you maintain the standard
of
that school. I don't know what it means, but if my interpretation is right, it might mean that if you are a neighbor of Alliance or Nairobi school, you cannot join if you can't afford the lifestyle in that school. That would be very, very,
that would mean day scholars would be paying just the same amount as...
I don't know what it means, but that is what is provided. It says you can join as a day scholar to a school provided that you can maintain the standard. And I think that is a very curious inclusion in the guideline that needs to be removed. I think that we need to accept that getting to 60% STEM is our aspiration, and we need to work towards it. But we should use this first grade 9 because CBC's promise to children was we shall allow every child to pursue what their interest and ability enables them. We should use this current grade 9 to see how those interests and abilities are distributed before we determine that 60% will be this, 25% will be this, and 15% will be this. We can't start investing based on this presumption because what we find might be different. One final thing that I need to say, which I think should be important for the long term, is that already the ministry is investing, the government is investing the highest percentage of its budget in education. It may not be possible to expand that.
Yeah.
However, we have something in this country called a housing levy, which most Kenyans have been hostile to. Why can't we convert that housing levy, starting this next financial year, into a school development levy, and get all the billions that taxpayers are paying, that are building houses many people really don't want and many don't need, to build classrooms and build laboratories, especially in our sub-county schools, and expand them so that we can be able to then remove these challenges of saying we will ensure equity in allocation of learners. Saying we will ensure equity and regional balance is admission that some schools are able to provide better opportunities for learning than others. And whose children are these others that we want to live after we have put those that we put through the regional balancing and everything else? Let us turn this housing levy into a school development levy and use all that money. We have time with that money to build labs in every sub-county school, to expand the capacities of those schools, and let all these children be comfortable to walk into the school next door without having to fight for the big schools. Because this year, if we are still on this path, the fight for the big schools will be worse than what we have seen before.
Yeah.
I think we need to correct that.
Indeed. Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa, Executive Director of Usawa Agenda, with a rather radical proposal: convert the housing levy into a school development levy and develop the schools, enable this transition to be smooth, and make sure they've got, the right teachers, the right equipment, the right infrastructure. And perhaps we're going to see something more chaotic than what we've always seen, which was perhaps the point of moving from 844 to CBC if this is not sorted out. Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa, for always making time for us here. We'll continue to focus on this transition to senior school as it continues to be an issue that parents and learners are grappling with in the country. That's my explainer tonight. Let's take a break. We have more news when we return.